Tonight, a new phase of the Israel-Hamas war. The death toll mounts as diplomats pledge to contain the conflict. A political push to prevent a widening war.
This is a conflict that could easily metastasize.
Urgent talks as tensions rise in the Middle East. Authorities search for the missing panel that blew off a Boeing midair.
We are very fortunate this didn't end up in something more tragic.
The investigation into what went wrong. Plus, school staff struggling under a lack of support.
It's really depressing when your job is to make people succeed and you don't have the resources to do that.
A call for action in classrooms across the country.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. 3 months into the conflict, Israel is entering a new phase of war as diplomats try to stop it from spreading. In Gaza, the death toll has topped 22,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. Just one tragedy among so many. While Al-Dadu mourning the loss of his son, Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief describing Hamza as generous and tender. Hamza was killed in an Israeli airstrike along with 2 other reporters. Israel says it does not target journalists, but according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, more than 70 reporters have been killed in Gaza so far. CTV's Jeremy Sharon has more now on the tensions in the Middle East.
Desperation and despair in the aftermath of daily bombardments. Now 3 months into this conflict, a political push to stop this war from escalating any further.
This is a moment of profound tension in the region. This is a conflict that could easily metastasize, causing even more insecurity and even more suffering.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting with Qatari officials today amid growing fears of a broadening battle. Along Israel's border with Lebanon, rocket exchange with Hezbollah has surged in response to the killing of a Hamas leader in Beirut this week. Hezbollah fired yesterday at IDF bases in the north, says this military spokesperson.
One of the principal efforts of Blinken is to keep a lid on that situation, to keep this war from expanding and becoming even broader.
Allahu Akbar! It was 3 months ago today, Hamas militants stormed parts of Israel, killing more than 1,000 and taking more than 200 hostage. In the enclave, the retaliatory strikes continue. Overnight, dozens were killed in Khan Yunis and Rafah. We were sleeping when a rocket hit us, says this 75-year-old man. I'm the only one left. My family is all gone, he says. In the occupied West Bank, these Palestinians are mourning after 7 men were killed in a strike here today. The IDF claims it's finished dismantling Hamas's military infrastructure in northern Gaza.
I think the Israelis may have taken out leadership. I don't think that they have in any way been able to completely eliminate Hamas operations in northern Gaza. And of course, the south is still problematic for them.
The IDF says forces will now focus on central and southern Gaza.
Now, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken is expected to make stops in Israel and the occupied West Bank this week. He says protecting Palestinian civilians will be part of the conversation with Israel. Heather?
Jeremy, thank you. Russian missile assaults on Ukraine killed at least 11 civilians, including 5 children, and injured 10 in the Donetsk region. Donetsk is on the front line of the fighting in the east and is partially occupied by Russian forces. In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky offered condolences to the families who lost loved ones. Families of victims continue to push for justice for Ukrainian flight PS-752, shot down by Iranian missiles in 2020. The federal government hasn't ruled out designating the entire Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist group. A vigil for the victims tonight at the University of Alberta on the eve of the 4th anniversary.
We just need to learn how to live with the pain. But I think fighting for justice has been one of our main motivation after the downing of Flight PS752 and gave our lives a kind of a new meaning.
All 176 people on board, including 55 Canadians and 30 permanent residents, were tragically killed. The investigation into the terrifying scare on board an Alaska Airlines flight may take months. Part of the plane's cabin ripped open midair, sending shockwaves through the aviation industry, though experts are also expressing relief that nobody was in the 2 seats beside the blowout. CTV's Tony Grace reports.
The surreal view of a 13-minute nightmare, which somehow didn't leave anyone seriously injured.
We are very fortunate here that this didn't end up in something more tragic.
The work now unfolding to figure out how and why a door plug blew out of an Alaska Airlines plane after it took off from Portland Friday night.
We are the global gold standard for safety around the world, but we have to maintain that standard.
More than 170 Boeing 737 MAX 9s built like the one involved with a covered mid-cabin door are still grounded for safety checks. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration saying even some checked recently may need more maintenance.
I think it's more likely than not that the whatever was defective happened at the factory during production, which has been an ongoing problem for Boeing for the last several years.
Recent quality control concerns with Boeing's 737 MAX series include an alert about possible loose hardware in the rudder control system and the possibility of an anti-icing agent causing overheating near engines.
This aircraft represented a quantum leap in technology, both from an operational standpoint and from a manufacturing standpoint.
But experts also note many plane parts are now made off-site. The fuselage for this type of plane, made by Kansas-based Spirit Aerosystems.
And then the parts are brought to Boeing for final assembly. So inherent in that process, you're multiplying the prospects for defect and problems.
The search for what may be the key to some immediate answers, the door that blew off the plane, focusing on an area just west of Portland. Tonight, Alaska Airlines says it's still waiting for instructions from the FAA and Boeing to start the inspections of those grounded planes. They canceled another 170 flights today and warned travelers to expect significant disruptions through this week, Heather.
Tony, thanks. A pilot has been found dead following a helicopter crash in BC's interior. The private chopper was traveling from Calgary to Sycamus, BC before it vanished and crashed in Glacier National Park east of Revelstoke, BC on Friday. Officials lost contact with the helicopter and say low visibility delayed an aerial search. The pilot was the only one on board. Many Canadians spent today digging out from an overnight snowfall. After a mild start to the season, winter has finally arrived. And there's excitement in the nation's capital. The low temperatures bringing hope the Rideau Canal will eventually open for skating. Here's CTV's Natalie Van Roy.
After a delayed start, winter is finally here.
It took a long time to arrive. So, I mean, I hope the winter is not too long, that it goes away as soon as we can so we can get back to nice warm weather.
Ottawa got its first dumping of snow this year over the weekend.
I cannot remember a later start to winter since we've been living in Ottawa.
In total, about 12 centimeters blanketed the National Capital Region.
For December snowfalls, we should be seeing a little bit over 50 centimeters total snowfall for the Ottawa region. So far this year, we've seen just a little over 20 centimeters, not including this most recent storm.
The city ramping up the plows out to clear off roads and area neighborhoods.
It's just the right amount. It's not going to stop traffic. It's not going to block you in your house. You can get out and enjoy it. We used to have dogs that love to go out in the snow and rollick around.
As residents digged out for the first time this year.
I am happy we have El Nino this year, that there's not a lot of snow, because I have to shovel, so I get not to do it.
The El Nino conditions bringing milder temperatures for weeks to the capital, but this is only the start to the winter conditions. Another system is on the way early next week.
it's going to pack a bit more of a punch than this past system. It's starting with snow late in the day on Tuesday, most likely in the afternoon or early evening.
Now that it feels more like winter in the nation's capital, skaters remaining hopeful that it's only a matter of time before they can get on the ice on the world-famous Rideau Canal. Crews were out Thursday night flooding a 2-kilometer section of the canal from Somerset Street to Patterson Creek as the National Capital Commission prepares for skating.
It was really sad that we couldn't get out on the canal last year, and it wasn't looking good for this year, so I'm hoping it stays cold.
After the canal didn't open at all last season, there's hope this winter's snap will lead to the opening of the season's traditional skateway. Natalie Van Roy, CTV News, Ottawa.
The winter break has come to an end as most students return to school tomorrow, but many teachers say they are heading back to a crisis in the classroom. CTV's Kamala Karmali reports on the push to do more to deal with overcrowding and burnout.
For most students, Monday means heading back to class. For teachers, it's a return to a crisis.
The hardest time for teachers is January through March, so we're only going to head in to a more difficult time.
What unions call an ongoing catastrophe, a lack of resources, causing unsustainable working conditions, resulting in burnout and other problems.
The numbers of classroom programs that we hear are being canceled. The number of unfilled vacancies that we have in our schools going up and up and up.
For teachers, principals,
it's very frustrating.
And parents. Rachel Birnbaum's 8-year-old daughter requires literacy help, but has only received a revolving door of substitute teachers, 5 in this school year alone.
If there's no permanent teacher, then there's no one looking out for their needs.
In Ontario, a survey found 96% of secondary school principals need more learning supports. In Quebec, the school year began with more than 8,500 teaching positions needing to be filled. New Brunswick's Teachers Association said 9 out of 10 surveyed saw their schools turn to an uncertified replacement or no substitute at all. Contract talks in Saskatchewan between the union and the province have reached an impasse over teacher working conditions, and in BC, 80% of teachers surveyed said they aren't able to support their students because of staffing shortages. Teachers also reporting facing increasing violence and abuse from students. The Canadian Teachers Federation says the only way to fix these problems is by renegotiating contracts to include better working conditions. And with a few deals already reached addressing some of those issues, they feel that they're at least headed in the right direction. Heather.
All right, Kamal, thank you. Schools are also facing a growing threat of cyber attacks. A university in Western Newfoundland is the latest in a long list of organizations and services impacted in recent months. CTV's Garrett Barry explains.
Back to school is looking a little bit different at Memorial University's Grenfell campus.
Obviously, not having Wi-Fi is not great, but they are actually finding some joy in this and going to the library and taking out more books than usual.
The school has been hit by what officials will only call a cybersecurity incident. So not only are classes delayed until Monday, but some email services, parts of campus internet, and even some payment machines have been shut off. Officials flipping those switches to try to contain the damage.
Even speaking from my own perspective, it's challenging to not have the IT services that we take for granted and rely upon minute to minute practically on every day.
Dealing with the fallout and joining other public institutions, like the Toronto and London Public Libraries and the Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec, that have been hit with attacks.
And because these universities have such a large amount of users that are either students or part of faculty, the cyber criminals just need to send an email to one of these folks, have them click on a link that they're not supposed to, and get infected.
Terry Cutler sells cybersecurity solutions. He says he finds in his work, some groups think they're too small to get targeted. In fact, the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity expects hackers to increase their attacks on small and medium-sized groups to make a bit of profit and stay out of the headlines.
Let's say an audit would cost, example, $10,000. Then they get hit with a ransomware, and now their bill is going to be $300,000 and up. So they could have saved almost 10 times their amount on initial preventative measures.
In Corner Brook, Memorial University says it's in the early steps of figuring out what exactly happened.
And until that investigation is complete, there's limited information that we can share, or indeed limited information that we know.
The school hasn't said whether any student or employee data was breached, but committed to reach out directly to anyone who may be affected. Garrett Berry, CTV News, St. John's.
Coming up, a bitter prescription for Canadian pharmacies.
I just question why there isn't a stand against this, because we really didn't need this here.
The consequences and concerns over new costs. Plus, 2 Montreal teens honored for their bravery for saving a couple from drowning. Pharmacists in Canada are warning of an American style of healthcare that's gaining ground in this country. It threatens to increase the cost of pharmaceutical services or limit access to some medications in rural areas. CTV's Colton Prale on what those in the industry are doing about it.
Pharmacies across Canada are swallowing a bitter pill to start the new year.
Basically, the pharmacy would be paying a fee just to have the privilege of looking after certain patients.
Kiro Massa says his pharmacies will have to pay roughly $3,000 each per year in fees after new costs were imposed by intermediary companies known as pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs. They act as middlemen between insurance providers and pharmacies, processing claims for a price. But now the biggest player in the country, Express Scripts Canada, is also charging pharmacies to serve some patients.
The consequences are going to be, again, what you already see in the States. So extra charges for services that were typically free, such as delivery fees.
Express Scripts Canada says the new pricing adjustment reflects the value and financial benefit its technology provides to pharmacies. In 2021, a U.S. congressional committee found PBMs negatively impacted patient health while increasing drug costs and creating conflicts of interest. In Canada, there are concerns a similar environment is being fostered without federal regulations.
PBMs are starting to own their own pharmacy. And in my view, what that's creating is an imbalance whereby they make it more difficult and more costly for community pharmacies to participate and serve their patients. Meanwhile, they make it more attractive to use their own pharmacy.
In addition to new charges, the Ontario Pharmacists Association says they're seeing a rise in closed preferred provider networks, something that limits which pharmacies can sell certain drugs. Adding more frequently, drugs are being limited to large corporate chains or pharmacies owned by PBMs themselves.
If you're a PBM and you own the pharmacy, it just goes from one pocket to the other. But if you're an independent pharmacy, that's a real loss.
But it's not just a financial concern. Pharmacists say it could leave patients unable to access medicine through their preferred provider or rural residents in a healthcare desert without a local pharmacy.
I just question why there isn't a stand against this, because we really didn't need this here.
The Canadian Pharmacists Association says they're planning on filing a complaint with the Competition Bureau this spring over the rising influence of these companies. The federal health minister did not say whether Ottawa plans to regulate this part of the industry, but did say generic drug prices have dropped in recent years. Heather.
Thank you, Colton. The Golden Globes are rolling out the red carpet tonight, and some of the stars are getting a Highland surprise. Still ahead, a piece of maritime culture makes its Hollywood debut. A who's who of Hollywood gathered tonight honoring the most talked about movies and shows of the year at the 81st Golden Globes. Taylor Swift emerged on the red carpet in sparkly green minutes before the star-studded show. Her attendance was the subject of a pre-show speculation, but the pop star skipped the NFL's Kansas City Chiefs game. Her Eras Tour concert film was up for Best Cinematic and Box Office Achievement, but was beat out by the blockbuster flick Barbie. There's a hidden gem at the Golden Globes. Some of the stars were gifted a piece of Cape Breton tartan created just for the big event. Sydney-based designer Red Label Kilts is in Los Angeles showcasing some maritime charm.
We had people that were they left saying that they're going to research and learn a little bit more about, our coal mines and that in Cape Breton and Cape Breton itself. So it was, I think, the perfect choice to bring that tartan here.
The tartan is called Absolute Darkness, a nod to Cape Breton's coal mining heritage. An HBO smash hit TV drama series shot in Alberta was a big winner in Los Angeles this weekend, racking up 8 Emmy Awards. The Last of Us took home hardware at the ceremony for artistic and technical achievement. The categories included prosthetic makeup, sound editing, and special visual effects. Of course, more awards will be handed out at the Primetime Emmys next Monday, broadcast right here on CTV. After the break, a daring display of courage during a day at the beach. 2 Canadian teens honored for their bravery in Barbados. We leave you tonight with a brave rescue. 2 Canadian teenagers are being hailed heroes for saving 2 other tourists from drowning in Barbados. CTV's Olivia O'Malley picks up the story.
If it weren't for these quick-thinking Montreal teenagers catching a final wave on their boogie boards, this picturesque shoreline in Barbados could have become the scene of a tragedy.
The woman, she was calling help, help, help.
Belinda and Robert Stone from South London were in the water when they say a strong current pulled them out farther into the ocean. Zoe Mecklensack Ireland rescued the woman, but her husband was struggling to return to the shore.
I could swim, but it was literally I wasn't able to actually achieve anything. I wasn't going anywhere.
Mecklensack Ireland and Emma Basterman went immediately back into the water with their boogie boards in tow to rescue the 68-year-old.
So I gave him my boogie board and I told him to go on it. And then my boogie board had a strap to it it was a tether and it would go around my ankle or my wrist. So I tied it to my wrist and then I swam parallel to shore until he could touch the sand.
Basterman is a competitive swimmer with the Dorval Swim Club. She's in the Caribbean island training for the Olympics.
If either of us were any weaker swimmers, it could have been a lot more disastrous for all of us.
The friends are being hailed as heroes.
So I just wanted to say thank you.
A local politician awarded them with a gift of appreciation. And back in England, the Stones say the young girls saved their lives by being in the water that day.
I really feel like we've got a good guardian angel looking out over us. If Zoe and...
Maybe a Canadian one.
Or in this case, maybe 2. Olivia O'Malley, CTV News, Montreal.
Well done, girls. What a story to remember. That's it for us tonight. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Sandy and Omar are back tomorrow. Good night.